Hello plant lovers, it is Matthew in Melbourne. Thank you very much for finding me in the crowded YouTube world of orchid videos. I do grow cold, cool, intermediate orchids here in Melbourne, Australia without any help. Literally, I wish sometimes I did, but from greenhouses or grow lights or humidifiers, just me and them inside or outside, or I don't bother at all. So plant lovers, if that sounds like your bag, I post every Friday, so do come along on my very amateur adventure so you too can bear witness to my many failures and odd triumph. And today, it's midwinter here in Melbourne, it's July, and can I just say it has been a long, tedious autumn and winter. It is miserable and cold and grey, the sun's not shining. And so I felt, you know what, there's actually a lot of things in bloom at the moment in deepest midwinter, bringing me a great deal of joy. So today's video is about what is in bloom midwinter in Melbourne for me. And I hope any of you in Melbourne share my disappointment in the season. It's just not that conducive to going outside and really doing anything, particularly orchidy, because you can't really do much with orchids when it's cold and wet and miserable. So all you can do is appreciate whatever blooms you've got. So I've not been doing much, but here we are nonetheless. So I think first cab off the rank is this beauty here, which you may be familiar with if you've watched any of my videos. It's Paphiopedilum Duo de Citron. Let me just get the label for you. Oh, it's handwritten, but anyway, there it is. Now I have had this orchid for 4 years, I think. It was one of my early purchases. There is the plant, looking very luscious, and I bought it in spike, and it is a sequential bloomer, and you can actually see the shades of flowers that once were 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is the 5th flower. Amazing yellow flower with this huge pouch and incredible yellow color. Now this one is beginning to go on the turn. It won't last much longer. But plant lovers, the reason why I have featured this again is that I first photographed this in bloom in November of last year. November, December, January, February, March, April, May, June, July. 9 months. So there has been a flower on this orchid for 9 months sequentially. Absolutely amazing. And given that it is so miserable at the moment and it is such a joyous buttercup yellow, I am just thrilled I bought this. It was a division and not inexpensive, but boy oh boy, bang for buck, and the joy this gives. Now I've made a care video about it, so I won't go into too much detail except to say it is a 2-year flowering cycle for me. So I've had 9 months worth of flowers out of it. It will now spend the next 12 months just growing, and then the following 12 months it will produce a flower spike for me again, hopefully. And interesting, the species ancestor of this, so one of the species ancestors is a Sumatran Paphiopedilum called Paphiopedilum primulinum, and that is the species that has the sequential flowers. And then the other species ancestor is Paphiopedilum armeniacum, which is a Chinese from Yunnan province species. And that is the one that has the yellow large flowers with the even bigger pouch on that species orchid. So those are the two ancestors for that, which gives us the color and the form and the sequential blooming. A fantastic orchid. And I have not yet been able to find in Australia other sequential bloomers like this. So I'm sure there are, because I'm sure there are. And there are Paphiopedilums that have multiple blooms, but they all tend to open at once. So finding another sequential bloomer that's not yellow would be fantastic. So if anyone knows of one, do put it in the comments below. All right, let's put Duo de Citron aside and look at this beauty. Now, this is a Oncidium Alliance, and it is a hybrid, and it's a no ID. I bought it from a nursery near me called Fitzroy Nursery, which I'll link below for you. They often have Oncidiums. Don't often have other types of orchids, but they often do have Oncidiums. One of the few places in Melbourne where you can buy flowering plants these days. And I just loved it because of the form and the size of the plant. Look at that, massive, beautiful flowers. I also really loved the sort of the burgundy and yellow color. It's just fantastic. But the point is, this was in bloom when I bought it 2 months ago, and it is still in bloom, and this is the last spike. The others have gone over, as they say, but such a glorious color. And I keep this one indoors all the time to enjoy the bloom, as I do with Paphiopedilum Duo de Citron that is on our dining table, smiling at us all the time. But this is an absolute beauty and a very, very, very vague fragrance. Lots of Oncidiums do have fragrance, and some, like the Shari Baby types, have a lot of beautiful fragrance. This is quite subtle. And because the flowers are a little older, the fragrance is probably dialing down because a pollinator isn't interested in older flowers. But anyway, nonetheless, a beautiful, beautiful flower and a gorgeous plant to have in bloom at this very miserable time of year. Now, last time I featured this, a viewer did give a suggestion as to what hybrid name it was, so I should actually hunt that out and I'll label it across the bottom as a question mark in case anyone might have a better idea what it is, but at this point, no idea. All right, now, next cab of our flowering in winter rank is this, but actually I'm cheating with this. Look at that. Absolutely gorgeous. There are those beautiful, beautiful purple flowers, which some people do call blue, but they're not. And it is, of course, Dendrobium Victoriae-Reginae. Oh, and it's found a friend. And this one is called Blue Bouquet. Now, I featured this on many a video because firstly, I was thrilled to find it. And I bought this on eBay because many people ask every time I show the plant. And the other point is, look at that, it's just gone gangbusters. And it has not been out of flower all year. Essentially, it's just been in continual bloom and continual growth all year. Midwinter, and I've got a new growth coming up here, and flowers still opening on some of the older stems. So really, quite an amazing orchid, and it's such a glorious colour to have outside. Now, I keep this one outside all year, all the time, so I don't bring it inside to enjoy the blooms. But because it's in bloom basically all the time, it is so wonderful to have it hanging outside and you catch this glimpse of these beautiful purple flowers, or blue if you so desire, but it's not blue. Super easy to grow. It's in fairly bright indirect light. I've made a care video about this, so I won't go into too much detail. The only thing to remember is slightly more light than perhaps you will read about for this particular Dendrobium. And the second thing is, because it basically grows all year and flowers all year, I water it all year. A little less in winter, obviously. I don't want to get it really cold and wet and miserable like me. But I do keep it moist in winter, but I don't feed it in winter. Look at those flowers, aren't they gorgeous? This Dendrobium just keeps on giving, and it is so delicious and joyous in midwinter to have this zing of purple when you go outside. Okie doke, let's move this Oncidium down here, and then let's look at this one dangling above me. Again, I have made many a video about this. This is a species Oncidium, and it is called Oncidium sphacelatum. Now, I have made a video about this too because it is a winter bloomer. Ta-da! Funnily enough, we're a midwinter, and here it is. And the flowers are very, very classically Oncidium-like with that yellow and sort of burgundy brown colorway. It is a Central American species, and it does grow in relatively high elevations in coolish, rainforesty, montane forests. But for some reason, it is very, very happy in Melbourne outside all year and blooms really well for me. It does have a very, very, very long spike. And I did wonder, should it have? But looking at other people's plants and particularly hearing other stories of growers, yeah, it seems to be a fairly common aspect of the plant. However, there are also lots of people who say, nope, their flower spikes are much shorter. So who knows? Mine is just a form perhaps with a particularly elongated flower spike. But it is super easy. It requires no special care or palaver whatsoever. It just classically blooms every year from its new growth, which started to emerge at the beginning of autumn. So there you are. And no fragrance from that one, but a beautiful cheery orchid. And because it does have such a long spike, it literally does dance and bob about in the wind, hence the whole dancing lady thing. A beautiful species Oncidium that is very easy to grow. Next up is this. Ta-da! Fantastic Cymbidium. Now I'll come in and show you. It is a pendulous type of Cymbidium, obviously. There it is hanging down. and a medium-sized plant, I think. Some of the upright Cymbidiums can be massive and some of the pendulous ones can be quite small. This is sort of halfway in between, but just such beautiful colours on the flowers. And this time last year, I went through a bit of a Cymbidium Facebook Marketplace binge because you often can't find unusual Cymbidium hybrids out there. There's lots of quite massive ones that are bright red or bright yellow and just a bit sort of garish for me. I kind of like more interesting colorways, and I saw this one and thought, you know what, my life is not complete. So I drove out miles to get it, and there it is. It has rewarded me with a fabulous and very early spike this year. Now, midwinter, here we are in Melbourne, it's July. Most of my Cymbidiums are just beginning to spike because they, for me, here in southern Australia, they tend to bloom in spring. The further north you get in the country, they're already open. I mean, people in Sydney certainly will have Cymbidiums open now and further north, but here in Melbourne, not so. But this one clearly is an early riser and likes to get its flowers out of the way and done and dusted super early in the season. But the flowers are just the most beautiful colour, and that's what drew me to it. I'm loving Cymbidiums. I've got a whole playlist of Cymbidiums, so I'll link that below. It's also a no ID, and there are so many hybrids of Cymbidiums, kind of impossible to name it, and I'm not that interested, to be honest, in the name per se. Just the colour is absolutely beautiful for me. Now, just lurking behind, oh goodness me, trying to get it out, our Cymbidium friend is our Coelogyne friend, and this is Janine Banks, and look at that. Isn't that fantastic? Now, I'm getting tangled up again. This is a beautiful Coelogyne. Now you can see that deep, 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 almost egg yolky orange right in the middle of the flower there. Absolutely stunning blooms and quite large, as you can see. Really, really beautiful, but the most delicious fragrance, and it is just like a jonquil. And given that it's midwinter, and actually some of the jonquils are in bloom already here in Australia, it is a very, very welcome sight on a very cheerless day, let me tell you. A glorious flower. Now again, I've made a care video about Janine Banks, and I've also got a Coelogyne playlist, so we won't go into too much detail, except to say it is winter and they are still growing, and all my Coelogynes, particularly cristata, do like to be watered throughout winter. They do tend to flower better for me, particularly cristata, if they're watered throughout the season. Now look at that, isn't it stunning? And what you might be able to see is a flower spike there. So this one bloomed for me 2 months ago, and this spike started to emerge as the other one faded away, and here we are, just beginning to open. You can see there's a few buds yet to open yet, but my goodness, it is such a delicious spring-like fragrance. Let me untangle you and get you back up here. A glorious orchid, and again, very easy to grow. And then rounding out our what's in bloom for me is this Miltonia Guanabara. Now again, this has been the star of many a video of mine because I decided to repot it in this bonsai dish. And again, this began blooming more than 2 months ago. And there's a spike at the back which is just going over. One spike I've cut off, and this one which opened a little bit later, but still in bloom. And each spike lasts at least 6 weeks. So incredible bang for buck. And this one, no fragrance at the moment. I think perhaps because the flowers are a little old and I can see a little bit brown, just beginning to turn. But when it's in its peak, it actually smells like coriander or cilantro. A beautiful, beautiful orchid. And this one I have also decided, in my infinite wisdom, to keep outside all year. And it's done really well this first winter. It's got a little bit of pesty problems, a little bit of scale, which it's tricky to treat at this time of year because spraying things, again, you don't want too much moisture, whether it's water or organic pesticide oil, to sit in the crown of the leaves or the leaf axis. So tricky to treat in winter, but come spring I will make sure that I'm treating this quite regularly to just nip those on the bud if they haven't gone already. So there we are, plant lovers. That is my winter wrap up for you, and there's Dendrobium Victoriae-Reginae still doing its glorious thing. Thank you very much for watching. Thanks for finding me. It is such a miserable day outside. I should stop saying that. We should be full of joy, being alive and surrounded by beautiful things. But it is wonderful to have things in bloom in the depths of winter here in Melbourne, because contrary to some beliefs, parts of Australia do have actually quite cold and miserable winters, and Melbourne is one of them. So there you are. It is wonderful to have some things in bloom. I hope wherever you are, your orchids are blooming and happy. If you're in the Northern Hemisphere, lucky you is all I can say. But you know, it will be warm again, Matthew. It will be warm again. So join me next week on Friday. Hit subscribe if you want to find out what I'm doing. And there are some things that I've got to do some maintenance of, and some things that are in bloom that are looking amazing. There's a first time bloomer for me which might be open next week. We'll have to see. Anyway, lots of things going on as we're past the solstice, and things are just starting to have the merest beginnings of activity as spring is closer to us than further away. Anyway, perhaps wishful thinking. But join me next week to see what's going on. But in the meantime, take care wherever you are, and I look forward to seeing you next Friday.